Hey, Internet. We've talked about it before and we're going to talk about it again. Racism, but from a different angle. So, in recent conversations across the internet, where a lot of black women have been taking space to talk about their grievances with black men, I have noticed that the main thing black women are asking black men to do is to do the work to unpack their trauma so they can actually be good partners to black women and be viable assets and reliable, uh, not reliable leaders, but a reliable force in the revolution to ultimately dismantle white supremacy. Because we're supposed to be working together. Um, some people have leaders, some people have followers, some people will coexist, whatever words you want to use for that. Um, but this is definitely not a thing that is automatically looking for towards men to be leaders. As a matter of fact, a lot of people agree that it'd be better if it was handled as a matriarch. I'm one of those people. And I have a very anecdotal reference point to how maybe not just black men, but for this situation we're talking about black men, handle that kind of feedback. So, someone I know asked one of their exes to wash the clothes. And he did. He washed the clothes. He did not put them in the dryer, did not fold them and put them away. He just washed the clothes. And with the understanding that everyone's communication style is different, he did what he was asked to do. What she wanted was for him to do the laundry, but she didn't say do the laundry. She said wash the clothes. And it's easy for any of us to assume that if you just want the clothes washed, then that means you have your own drying techniques because there's different ways to dry clothes. There's also different clothing settings, like you want some of those on delicate or, whatever you do with your drying process that might be more complicated than your washing process. So I see it both ways, right? And if you want do the laundry, you should say do the laundry. For how I see black men who don't take that suggestion very well of unpack your trauma so you can be better partners and better parts of the revolution, it's definitely the okay, if I go to therapy and I unpack my trauma, then I should get accolades for doing exactly what you asked me to do, regardless of how I go on to treat people or treat our material conditions after that. Because it's a lot more complicated than just the laundry, right? This is about how the pinnacle of privilege is a white man, a rich, not even heterosexual cisgender at that point, just a white man. Maybe even religious if we want to add bonus points. And they already have half of that being a man. Like the patriarchy works for them until it doesn't. The patriarchy works for men until they become the victims of patriarchal violence. Male rape victims get treated like worse shit than any other identified rape victim because they become emasculated in the process as well. Violent crimes happen against men. Well, then why did you just let it happen? Why didn't you fight the guy back or whatever? Unless, of course, he had a weapon. Usually a gun, because this is America. Men get blamed for not fighting back, whereas women identified people get blamed for what they were doing, what they were wearing, the time of day it was, pretty much anything except blaming the perpetrator, who is usually a man, for what they did. And worse if it's a family member, co-worker, anything like that, which is who it usually is. It's more likely someone that you know rather than a stranger. So you also have to deal with the psychology of like the trust being broken. So, but you know, let's say you go through your life, you never get robbed, raped, anything like that. You've spent a lot of your life with the patriarchy working for you. And it's hard to get men to unlearn that the patriarchy doesn't work for everyone. Patriarchy hurts everyone when they haven't experienced any patriarchal violence themselves. And a lot of them will go through their lifetime not experiencing that, but they will experience the racism of being followed around a store for expecting to steal. Maybe get trumped up charges, trumped up jail or prison sentence time, trumped up punishments that we know are more connected to racism than it is patriarchal violence. Even though those things go hand in hand. But they are definitely categorized differently. Like, that didn't happen to you because you're a man. Or maybe it did. And you're black. Because black people are treated with different threat levels based on our skin tone, perceived gender, and our background, if we want to get into that part of like, did you come from a well-to-do background, or are you in the, you know, poor area or something like that. And it may be hard to read the differences between the colorism, the sexism, the racism, but all that leads right back to the white supremacy and how the whole system is made to keep everyone that isn't a rich white man oppressed. And note, I said rich white man. Poor white people also see these things, which is why a lot of poor white people don't believe in racism. When really, white supremacy doesn't care about white people, which is why poor white people also suffer the consequences of racism. But they're not taught level 3. They're just taught level 1 of like, I'm white and I don't get shit. You're white and you don't get shit because you're poor. And because the system is set up to keep black and brown people poor, you just fall through the cracks because elite white people don't care about you. But back to black men. Like, this just doesn't want to stay. And all that still ties back into what I'm saying. And white women, who are usually more likely to be more educated than black men, usually, but not always. But, you know, systemic shit going on with whiteness. White women who get it see how white women and black men are the subjugators and the subjugated. Historically speaking, white women have had a better place over black men because they are closer to white man because white. Whereas I think nowadays when we talk among black people, we kind of act like white women and black men are like constantly in a race between the two. Whereas I feel like white women know that white men are always going to want them around for their company, for their emotional labor, like hang out and be the secretary that I like do inappropriate sexual things to and also carry my emotional labor, whereas the black man is just for the labor. And people will agree or disagree with me on that. I'm not presenting this in some sort of scholarly I'm right type shit. Have your own perspective. But the difference between white women and black men is that black men ignore black women, whereas white women don't really get to ignore white men. And it can turn into all kinds of word use semantics or loopholes because one particular black woman didn't use the exact wording that one particular black man liked, so she gets like downplayed and even demoralized because she didn't say the words that this group of black men or this one black man or whatever didn't want to hear or any shit like that. When really, what it all boils down to, based on what I'm hearing, is black men need to do better by black women. It's not just about going to therapy. It's also about decolonization, learning the history of trauma among black families to try to do the restorative justice work, unlearning what massa taught you about relationship dynamics and household dynamics. Some will say relationship anarchy. Some people use other words. Just overall dismantling this idea that you own your partner. And black women need to work on that too. And that's definitely something that women got from men. And like, it just ends up being this toxic fucking thing that people end up doing to each other. But you don't own your partners. You don't own their relationships. The constant struggle and need for dominance comes from white supremacy. And yet, there are ways that if black women act that way, they don't get the same grace as black men. And based on what I've seen, in my own personal experience, I've seen black men get to lash out and act out in a way in which is acceptable for them to be angry. But if a black woman does that, she's unreasonable and crazy and an unsalvageable personality. And that is the way other black people will treat a black woman versus a black man. But like, it's all the same to white supremacy. So the tail end of this is that anything we do to degrade each other as black people all goes back to feeding into white supremacy. When it comes to how we're all treated, like light skin, dark skin, gender, sex, health conditions, all that shit, anything we do to push separatism among each other just feeds into white supremacy because they love us being separate. Because it's divide and conquer. Like, very basic, very classic. You've heard it before. It's that too. And we all need to come to terms with our trauma. The whoopings came from slavery. The threatening to take away food or resources by the people that you trust, friends, family, whatever, that came from slavery. All of these things, like yelling at your kids, calling your kids ugly, all that came from slavery. Like, please look up pretty much how everything's basically rooted in slavery, including modern day family dynamics. Or segregation. Or specifically with like when black people started getting on public assistance, how all these rules were made to basically break up black families. I think the main culprit that people look to is food stamps, but that was also Section 8 and whatever else. But then also shaming black people for being on public assistance because it has historically hurt us. That's just more separatism that feeds right back into the white supremacy. So yeah, this video is already about 15 minutes. So I'm going to cap it off there. And if there's no other takeaway you get from anything that I've said, it's that do better is a starting point. You need to figure out what's best for you to do better, to be a better partner and contributor to the overall community.